The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. Inside was a foreclosure notice from Ridgemont Heights HOA and a fine structure that climbed from $500 to $18,000 in less than 90 days. They wanted my property, and they'd engineered a paper trail to take it. What they didn't know, what Diane Hartwell and her board had somehow never bothered to verify in 12 years, was that the cell tower generating 83% of the HOA's annual operating budget wasn't on community land. It was on the 1-acre parcel I owned separately, the same acre they'd just declared war over. I set the letter on my kitchen table next to the lease agreement I'd signed with Apex Wireless in 2009, and I made one phone call. The second call would come later, but the first one was to my attorney, and the only thing I said was, "Tom, they just gave me everything I need." But let me go back to where this actually started, because you need to understand how deliberate this was. My name is Robert Cain. I'm 54, a retired petroleum engineer, and I've lived on the same property in Ridgemont Heights, Montana, since 2008. Two structures sit on my land: a 3-bedroom ranch house on a 1/4-acre residential lot, which is part of the HOA, and a separate 1-acre parcel directly behind it, which I purchased in the same transaction but was never joined to the subdivision plat. That acre was agricultural land when I bought it. Still is, legally. I keep equipment on it: a small metal barn, a gravel pad, and as of 2009, a 70-foot cell tower leased to Apex Wireless for $36,000 annually. The HOA had no claim to that acre. They never had. The trouble started in March when I declined to fund the new community center. Ridgemont Heights HOA had operated for years on cell tower lease revenue funneled through a shared revenue arrangement they'd negotiated with me back in 2010. The agreement was simple. They handled property tax billing for the acre in exchange for 20% of the lease income. It wasn't required. My acre wasn't in their jurisdiction, but it kept things simple, and I didn't care about the money. Then Diane Hartwell became board president. Diane was a real estate attorney from Denver who'd bought into Ridgemont 2 years ago, and she had plans. Big ones. A fitness center, a redesigned entrance, mandatory landscaping standards that required professional companies, not residents with mowers. All of it required funding the HOA didn't have, and Diane's solution was a special assessment for $1,000 per household. I voted no at the March meeting. So did 9 others. Diane didn't take it well. 2 weeks later, I received a violation notice. My metal barn, which had been on the back acre since 2011, was cited as non-conforming auxiliary structure in violation of aesthetic standards. I wrote back explaining, politely, that the barn wasn't on HOA land. The response came from Diane personally. All properties within Ridgemont Heights fall under Architectural Review Authority per Article 9, Section 3. I pulled the original covenants. Article 9, Section 3 applied only to platted subdivision lots. My back acre had never been platted into the subdivision. I sent Diane a copy of the county survey with the parcel boundaries highlighted. She sent me a $500 fine. I didn't pay it. The fines escalated weekly. Failure to comply, $500. Continued violation, $700. Refusal to engage with board directives, $1,000. By mid-May, I was holding $16,000 in citations for a barn that sat on land the HOA had zero authority over. That's when I received the foreclosure notice. The letter explained that under Montana HOA statute, unpaid fines exceeding $10,000 entitled the association to place a lien on the property and, after 90 days, initiate foreclosure proceedings. Diane had filed the lien in April. The 90 days ended June 19th. I read the letter 3 times. Then I walked out to the back acre, stood under the cell tower, and looked up at the array of panel antennas humming quietly in the wind. Apex Wireless paid me $36,000 per year. 20% of that, $7,200, went to the HOA as part of our 2010 agreement. But the agreement wasn't a covenant. It was a handshake arrangement I could terminate with 30 days' notice. And the tower lease itself? That was between me and Apex. The HOA wasn't a party to it. They had no contractual right to the revenue. They'd been receiving it as a courtesy, one I'd extended because it helped cover their operating budget, and I didn't need the full income. I looked at the foreclosure letter again. Then I looked at the tower. Diane Hartwell had spent 3 months trying to intimidate me into funding her projects. She'd manufactured violations, weaponized fines, and filed a lien against property she had no jurisdiction over. She'd done all of it while sitting on a board that depended entirely on income one controlled. I went inside and called Tom Briggs. Tom, I need you to draft 2 letters. One terminates my revenue sharing agreement with the HOA. The other notifies them that any attempt to foreclose on my residential lot will result in immediate litigation for abuse of process, and I'll be seeking full legal fees. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then, you're cutting off their funding. I'm correcting a misunderstanding, I said. The first letter went out on a Thursday via certified mail and email to the full HOA board. It was 1 page, polite, and surgically precise. It terminated the 2010 revenue sharing arrangement effective 30 days from receipt, cited the lack of any binding covenant requiring me to share tower income, and confirmed that all future Apex wireless lease payments would be retained by me as the sole landowner of the parcel. Tom included a second paragraph noting that the HOA's recent lien filing applied to my residential quarter-acre lot, not the 1-acre parcel generating the cell tower revenue, and that the 2 parcels were legally distinct under county records. He attached the survey plat, the original deed, and the Apex lease agreement with my name as the sole lessor. The final sentence was the part I'd asked him to sharpen. Any continued assertion of HOA authority over the non-platted acre, or any foreclosure action based on fines assessed against that parcel, will be defended vigorously and will include claims for malicious abuse of process. Diane called me 6 hours later. I didn't answer. She called 4 more times that evening. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages started calm and ended with something close to panic. The second letter went to Apex Wireless the same day, copied to the HOA. It clarified that I was the sole owner of the leased parcel, that no third party held any interest in the lease, and that all future payments should be directed exclusively to my account. Apex confirmed receipt within 24 hours. The HOA's operating budget was public record. I'd reviewed it the week before sending the letters. Total annual revenue, $41,000. Sources, $7,200 from my tower sharing, $31,000 from resident dues, and about $2,000 from clubhouse rentals and late fees. Expenses ran $39,000. Road maintenance, insurance, management company fees, utilities for common areas. The budget worked because of the tower income. Without it, they'd be running a deficit within 60 days. Diane called an emergency board meeting for Saturday morning. I wasn't invited, but Karen Purcell, a neighbor and the board's treasurer, stopped by my house that afternoon. She looked exhausted. "Robert, what you're doing is going to bankrupt the HOA." I offered her coffee. She shook her head. "Diane's been telling us for 3 months that your property was fully under HOA jurisdiction. She said the tower income was contractually guaranteed. We just found out none of that's true." "It's not," I said. "She filed the lien without a full board vote. She told us it was a standard collections action." I nodded slowly. "Karen, your president has been issuing fines against a property she has no authority over, and she's trying to foreclose on my home to force compliance. That's not a billing dispute. That's targeted harassment." Karen looked at the floor. "The special assessment failed. Diane's been trying to find other revenue sources. She thought if she could force you to sell the back acre, she thought she could take it," I said. Karen didn't argue. The emergency meeting lasted 4 hours. I know because Karen called me afterward from her car. The board had reviewed the survey plat, the lease, and the original covenants. 3 of the 5 members hadn't known the back acre was a separate parcel. Diane had described it as unimproved HOA land in at least 2 board summaries. Greg Ventura, the vice president, had asked Diane directly whether she'd verified HOA jurisdiction before filing the lien. According to Karen, Diane said jurisdiction was implicit because the parcel adjoined subdivision property. Greg had asked to see the legal opinion supporting that. Diane didn't have one. The board voted 4-1 to withdraw the lien immediately and issue a formal apology. Diane was the single no vote. The apology letter arrived Monday. It was signed by Greg, not Diane, and it was about as carefully worded as a document can be when the organization knows it's been caught doing something legally indefensible. They rescinded all fines related to the back acre, withdrew the foreclosure notice, and requested a meeting to discuss terms for continuing the revenue-sharing arrangement in a manner acceptable to all parties. I read it twice, then called Tom. "They want to negotiate." "Of course they do," Tom said. "You're holding their operating budget. What do you want to do?" I looked out the kitchen window toward the cell tower. The Apex lease ran another 9 years with automatic renewals. At $36,000 annually, that was over $300,000 in guaranteed income, and every cent of it was mine. I want Diane Hartwell off the board, I said. I want a written acknowledgement that the back acre is not HOA property. And I want a formal policy prohibiting the board from filing liens without a recorded covenant violation and a full board vote. And the revenue share? I thought about it. I'll consider reinstating it at 10%, not 20%, but only after the other conditions are met. Tom was quiet for a moment. Robert, you know you don't owe them anything. I know, I said, but I still live here. Diane Hartwell resigned from the HOA board on a Wednesday evening via email. The message was 2 sentences long, cited personal reasons, and was sent to the board's general address without elaboration. Karen forwarded it to me an hour later with a single line. It's done. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The board met the following week and voted unanimously to adopt 3 new policies. First, all future architectural citations required photographic evidence and a recorded covenant reference before fines could be assessed. Second, any lien filing required a full board vote and an independent legal review confirming the association's authority. Third, the HOA formally acknowledged in the meeting minutes that parcel 47B, my back acre, was not part of the platted subdivision and was not subject to HOA architectural authority. Greg Ventura called me the day after the meeting. You didn't waste time. Robert, I owe you an apology. I should have asked more questions earlier. I didn't, and you got hit with something that should never have happened. I respected him for that. Greg was a mechanical engineer, careful and methodical, and he'd been the first board member to pull the actual property records once the dispute went public. I appreciate that, Greg. We'd like to meet with you. No pressure, just a conversation about what a revised arrangement might look like. The HOA's in a tough spot without the tower income. I agreed to meet on neutral ground. We sat in a booth at Reardon's Diner on Friday morning, Greg, Karen, and myself. Tom Briggs had reviewed the terms I was willing to offer, and I laid them out clearly. 10% of the Apex lease income, not 20. $7,200 annually reduced to $3,600. The agreement would be documented in a formal contract with a termination clause requiring 60 days' notice from either party. The HOA would cover property taxes on the back acre as before, but the contract would explicitly state that the arrangement created no HOA authority over the parcel itself. Greg looked at Karen. She nodded. We'll take it to the board, Greg said, but I think you'll have unanimous support. The contract was signed 3 weeks later. Tom drafted it. Both parties reviewed it, and it was ratified at the June board meeting. I didn't attend, but Karen sent me the signed copy with a short note. Thank you for not walking away entirely. I thought about that for a while. The truth was, I could have kept the full $36,000 and let the HOA collapse. They'd overstepped badly, tried to take property they had no right to, and nearly cost me my home. A lot of people would have salted the earth, but I'd lived in Ridgemont Heights for 16 years. I knew these people. Most of them had no idea what Diane had been doing until it blew up. And once they knew, they'd acted correctly. The HOA's revised budget, minus my income reduction, required modest cuts, deferred landscaping upgrades, a cheaper management company, reduced clubhouse hours. Nothing structural. They'd survive. Diane Hartwell moved out of Ridgemont in August. I heard it from Karen, who mentioned it in passing during a neighborhood cleanup day. Diane had taken a position in Bozeman and sold her property within 30 days. I didn't ask for details. She was gone, and that was enough. I still see Greg and Karen regularly. We're cordial. The HOA runs quietly now, no drama, no overreach. The cell tower hums along, generating income one no longer take for granted. On a cool evening in late September, I walked out to the back acre and stood under the tower the way I had the day I received the foreclosure notice. The panel antennas caught the last of the daylight, and somewhere overhead a hawk circled lazily in the thermals. I thought about what this whole situation had taught me. Not just about HOA overreach, though that was part of it, but about the way institutional authority works, or doesn't, when it's built on assumptions nobody bothered to verify. Diane Hartwell had wielded her position like a weapon, certain that rules and bylaws and formal letters were the same as actual power. She'd never checked the property records. She'd never confirmed jurisdiction. She'd just assumed that because she held the title and control the board, She controlled me. She'd learned otherwise, the hardest way available. I turned back toward the house, the gravel crunching under my boots. Behind me, the tower stood quiet and permanent. 70 feet of galvanized steel on an acre of land that was mine, had always been mine, and would remain mine as long as I wanted it. The foreclosure notice was still in a file folder in my office, preserved the way you preserve evidence of things you don't ever want to repeat. I didn't look at it often. I didn't need to. Some lessons, once taught, don't require review.